Silakan, Bu.
Okay, can we start now, Raras?
Yes.
Thank you. According to the schedule, the seminar will be started at 10 o'clock. Okay, it's okay, no problem. Yeah. Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to the Almighty Allah who given us the opportunity to having this moment in a good condition as well as health despite in the pandemic issue that we are currently facing. This seminar aims to provide insight to students regarding the latest topic from the development of management science, as well as establish networking between the management department of the Faculty of Economic and Business Airlangga University and the School of Business Queensland University. That's according to the tour, yeah. Dr. Felix. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name Dien Mardhiyah. I'm a head of management study program, Faculty of Economic and Business University Airlangga. And I'm pleased to be a moderator of this seminar today. We appreciating and welcoming you all of the participants of the series international seminar. As you know, that this seminar proudly presented by Department of Management, Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Airlangga. This seminar is the first seminar in the serial international seminar that have 7 seminars. If you want to know more about other seminars, including in the serial international seminar, follow our news and information. And this is how many participants kita. Raras, 59. Okay, yeah, we have 59 participants who came from. I think it's majority of this is a student. Yes, no problem. Okay, selamat pagi teman-teman. Apa kabar? You can send the react to us by click reaction button, like clicking. Okay. Clipping hand. And give us the thumb up when you're ready with us right now. Okay. Before we go to main agenda, let me announce several important rules for this seminar. The first, participant microphone must be turned off and participant camera must be turned on. Yeah. Use a full name for Zoom account. Participant may use Zoominar's official background. Yeah, that's better. The question can be read in the public chat column or directly speak to the speaker with arrangement from the moderator at the Q&A session. And the question must be include name and the affiliation. Yeah. Don't forget to fill the link presentation. Maybe that soon we'll share on the public chat. It's related with the e-certificate. Once again, for all the participants, welcome to this seminar. Hopefully today will be a fruitful event. And before we start this seminar, I would explain about our agenda. The first opening speech from the Secretary Department of Management, yeah, and then continue with the presentation about charitable advertising during COVID-19 from our great speaker, Dr. Felix Septianto. And like other seminar, for the last, we have Q&A session. And for closing the seminar, closing remark will be given from the Secretary of the Department again. Okay, for the first agenda, I would like to invite our Secretary Department, Dr. Yeti Dwi Lestari, for the opening speech. For Dr. Yeti, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dina. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Yeah. First of all and foremost, I would like to thank to our honorable speaker, Mr. Felix Septianto. Welcome to our university by online, yeah, of course, not coming here. And Ms. Dien Mardhiyah as a moderator, and everyone for allocating time in this weekend to attend this section. Yeah. Of course, I think the topic from this event is very interesting and maybe become idea for student, become your thesis, yeah, or your writing in your article maybe, yeah, because it's related to marketing issue, charitable advertising during COVID-19. Yeah. Mrs. Dina already told about this is one of event that a seminar activity series conducted by Department of Management, yeah, to how management roles overcoming problem that arise due to the pandemic, yeah. And of course, yeah, this activity happened because extraordinary contribution of various party, especially to Mrs. Raras, yeah, Mr. Tantowi, yeah. So from the bottom of my heart and all those who's involved in organizing this event, I would like to say thank you very much from Department of Management. Okay, thank you for this time from Ms. Dien Mardhiyah. Okay, I'll give it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bu Yeti, from the opening speech. Okay, let's start the seminar. What about my voice? Is it okay, Raras?
It's clear.
Because
It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. I read unstable connection in my laptop. Okay, today we have a seminar with the title Charitable Advertising During COVID-19. That's such a great topic. As we know that the pandemic COVID-19 creates a new condition, new normal condition. And if we talk about advertising, we talk about communication and information. And for the company, advertising is the activity that the company has to pay in a large amount costs to create profit in the long run. On the other hand, yeah, if we talk about charity, we talk about care about others' condition. What about charitable advertising, especially during the pandemic of COVID-19? Can we say that it will be related with non-profit activity? Okay, today we're so lucky because we have a great speaker. Actually, he has a long CV and I certain it. He is currently a senior lecturer in Queensland University. His qualifications are PhD program in University of New South Wales, Australia, master program in Kyung-hee University, South Korea, and bachelor program in Parayangan Catholic University, Indonesia. And that's surprising me. He has published his research in many journals. 59 articles. Wow. 59 articles in the last 5 years with ABDC qualification. Yeah. For the information, ABDC is Australian Business Dien Council. It's qualification for high quality journal, identical with Q1 journal. Yeah, like Journal of Consumer Psychology, European Journal of Marketing, Journal of Business Ethics, and International Journal of Research in Marketing. And about 15 awards related with research and publication as well, like Best Paper and Best Reviewer. So amazing work. Suddenly I have an idea. We have to plan to invite Dr. Felix to sharing his experience, how to have a lot of publications in high quality journal, of course. Maybe it's going to be not by Bu Yeti. Okay. Without further ado, because you all have impatience for such a great speaker, here he is, Dr. Felix Septianto, and I would like to say a special greet for him.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Felix. I'm grateful to have you at this seminar. How is it going?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Okay, nice to meet you, Dr. Felix. Can Can I call you Dr. Felix or Dr. Septianto, as we know in
You can-
Indonesia? Who used his
Just
first name?
you could call me Felix. Maybe it's easier even.
Okay.
Free to call me
No problem.
Felix. Yeah.
Okay, Felix. Yeah.
Okay.
Still
cool.
comply with health protocol?
Yes. I mean, it's lockdown here in New Zealand for 4 weeks now. So like, yeah, I haven't been out for quite some time.
Okay, I think we have to comply with health protocol. Okay, without wasting time, please, Dr. Felix, the time is yours.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this time. I really appreciate the invitation. So I'm hoping that this presentation will be helpful for all of you. And I guess the idea of this presentation comes from kind of like disasters, not really for COVID per se, but like when I did this presentation studying like 2 years ago, I do a lot of issues in the context of disasters, and I think this hopefully will be helpful, especially during this time during the pandemic. So please allow me to share my screen. Yeah. I hope everyone can see well. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah,
Okay.
my name is. Thank you. So my name is Felix. I'm from the University of Queensland. Although at the moment, like given the border closure, I'm still located in New Zealand. But today I would like to present you, I guess it's kind of like two interrelated projects that I have on how what we need to do, especially to leverage charitable advertising in this situation during pandemic. And I would like to address 3 research questions in this presentation. And I use these 3 research questions. It's more kind of like how I structure my presentation. So the first one, charitable advertising, essentially we want to encourage helping behavior, pro-social behavior, right? So I think the first question would be like, why encouraging pro-social behavior is important during disasters, as such at the moment during COVID-19 pandemic. And what I want to argue is like pro-social behavior can increase resilience, both at the individual level, so basically we as individuals, but also we as a society, and that will be helpful. And secondly, it can also reduce the government's burden, especially in the context of spending associated with disaster recovery. Now that we know that encouraging pro-social behavior is important, the second research questions that I want to, I guess, address is like, how then we can encourage social behavior during disasters, right? And in this sense, I want to build from the emotional perspective, and I guess that's largely because my expertise is on how emotion influence consumer. So that's my expertise. That's why I want to build on how we can capitalize on specific emotion, which is threat-based. And this specific emotion is unique because this is a novel emotional experience associated with disasters. Okay. And the last question that I want to address is, now that we want to focus on this specific emotion, the question is like, how can we capitalize on this, essentially to encourage social behavior? And what I want to argue is that there are 2 ways. And that's why like this is when like I have two interrelated projects in this area. So the first one, I want to argue that we can cultivate growth mindset. And then secondly, we can also cultivate high control level using advertising messages. So these are, I guess, the 3 research questions that we will address today. And this is also how I will structure this presentation in general, based on these 3 research questions. Right. So the first one, why encouraging pro-social behavior is important during disasters in general. And I guess in particular, we're talking about COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to build based on the situation at the moment, right? So based on recent reports, Indonesia's spending on fighting its ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, it said it could exceed 300 trillion rupiahs this year alone. And that's a huge number. It influences a lot of, I know a lot of people whose businesses have been basically destroyed during COVID-19, both here and also my colleagues and my friends in Indonesia. And when we're talking, worse than that, when we're talking about the death toll, as of September 16, which is basically recently, like Indonesia registered almost 140,000 deaths from COVID-19. And again, that is really, really horrible, I guess. And for instance, like a couple of months ago, like my family, my relatives, like got COVID-19, for example. And I do know some friends whose parents, whose grandparents, whose like relatives have died because of COVID-19. So I think like without a doubt, like all of us who basically like listening to this presentation can agree how bad the situation is. And then we have experienced so much difficulties during this pandemic. And that's why like recent research basically said COVID-19 pandemic has been described as one of humanity's worst disasters and a source of unexpected adversity and hardship for many people. And I think we can all agree from even our personal experience about this. Now, if that's the case, then I think how we can kind of like help with it, at least a bit, essentially, right? And research from psychology show that resilience can help us to get through and overcome hardship, because it helps us to be kind of like stronger during the situation, essentially, to be able to withstand the difficulty. But then the problem is resilience is not something that we are born with; it's built over time. So the question that we want to address then, like how can we develop individual resilience when we experience such disasters, essentially, right? And to address that, I want to build based on the idea of prosociality, or like kind of like encouraging prosocial behavior. So at the individual level, prosociality help people to have positive outlook about negative situation. It helps us to regulate negative emotion, right? Because when we want to do good to other people, when we are able to help other people during difficult situation, it helps us to see a better situation, that like we are able to help other people. We are more able to see that actually we are capable to do something good, essentially. It also helps us to regulate our negative emotions. So at the individual level, basically like encouraging prosocial behavior can help us to increase those resilience. At the society or at the community level, prosociality also builds social support. Why? Because when we help other people, we kind of like build relationship with that person. Not just we as individual, but we also as a community. When we help each other, it builds social support, and that can help us as community to make us feel stronger, that we are able to overcome this hardship together as a community, as a society. And essentially, the idea is like by encouraging people to help each other, we can build and we can be more resilient as individual and as community. And that's why it is important to encourage prosocial behavior. Now, from the public policy perspective for the governments, it's actually also helpful to understand why we can encourage prosocial behavior. It's because like we know that like even Indonesia alone, we have experienced so many natural disasters, even like let alone like apart from COVID-19 in 2018, 2019, before COVID-19. There's a lot of natural disasters that basically occurred in Indonesia. And that situation creates burden for the government, like rising costs for the disaster recovery and all those kind of things. And that's why if we can encourage people to help each other as individual, as community, we can also help the government to reduce the burden, essentially. So that's the importance from the public policy perspective. So I guess essentially from this, we know that encouraging prosocial behavior is important because we can increase resilience and also can help the government interact. Okay. Now that we know why encouraging prosocial behavior is important, the next question would be then how we can encourage prosocial behavior during disasters. And in this regard, I want to build based on the role of emotion on consumer decision making, because like, well, the major important reason is because my expertise is on emotion. Most of my research is about studying emotion. But from the theoretical perspective, there is research from the past 2 decades, 3 decades even almost, show that emotions have significant role on consumer decision making. It influences us in a such strong way. Like when we feel bad in the morning, it influences the other thing in our workplace. Maybe we feel bad in the morning because we don't sleep well. in the workplace afterwards, when we study or when we work, we feel bad because we didn't sleep well, just even though it's unrelated. So emotions have a strong influence. I think we all can agree that. And I like this, maybe some of you have watched Inside Out. So it's like 2015 animation movie from Disney Pixar. So actually, like when I did my doctoral degree in 2015, this movie just came out. So actually, I used this example when I did my doctoral presentation. So that's the additional funny information. But anyway, we all can agree, I guess. Like even they make movie that how strong the effects of emotion on us essentially when we make decision. And when we talk about marketing and advertising as well, we can see that a lot of them, they use emotional appeals. Basically showing and demonstrating and highlighting that it is worthwhile to study how the effects of emotion on charitable decision making. And the next question that we want to ask, I guess, if that's the case, then what is the unique emotion associated with disasters? And what I want to focus on today is threat-based awe. So the emotion of awe, like when we feel awe, most research until now, they have focused on studying awe as a positive emotional state. So positive means pleasant. Experiencing awe, basically we feel good when we see a beautiful painting, for example, when we see a beautiful landscape and all those beautiful things in nature, we feel awe. That's the pleasant things, right? However, it's actually much more complex than that. So when we talk about, for example, religion, when we talk about the idea of God, for example, it's not just about pleasant. There's a sense of respect as well. So it's not just purely happiness, but also like awe in addition to respect, right? And when we talk, for example, like this is also my favorite. Like I used to read like Harry Potter. So if you see the image I put here, it's basically like it's like this guy is called Ollivander. He's kind of like a wand maker. When he talked about the main like antagonist of the story, essentially, the Voldemort, he called like, after all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible but great. So it's kind of like a mix. If you can see here, it's great, which is kind of like when we talk about, oh, it's great things, positive things, but also he also used the word terrible, which is kind of like a bit kind of like negative. And that's also related with the idea of, oh, actually, oh, is actually not just positive, not just pleasant, but the upper reaches of pleasure, but also on the boundary of fear. So when we feel awe, it's not just feeling, not just awe, not all of awe, so-called awe. This awe, and we call this threat-based awe, is a distinctive negative flavor of awe that is associated with something that is threatening. So when we think about natural disasters, we think like, oh, that's so great. We feel awe because we feel so small in the presence of disasters. But at the same time, it's not just pleasant. We feel afraid. We feel threatened. And that's the idea of threat-based awe, essentially. That is the emotion that is unique to the idea of natural disasters. And that's why I want to examine this emotion in this regard. So I want to develop the theoretical perspective based on so-called functionalist perspective. And the idea is like emotions have developed as a means to effectively coordinate our response to an environmental challenge. Essentially, emotions help us so that we can survive in our environment. Essentially, that's the idea of the theory. Okay? And in the case of awe belongs to the idea of, like they call it, self-transcendent emotions. So the self-transcendent emotions is basically a group of emotions that is not just about us. Those emotions help us so that we can actually build social relationship with other people. For example, gratitude. So gratitude is part of self-transcendent emotion that help us to basically build connection with other people. Awe is also a kind of self-transcendent emotion. It makes us to feel small, and that's why we want to build relationship with other people. And that's why, like, based on this perspective, awe motivates us to focus on the collective good, not just our own good, but the good of the society, good of people around us. And that's why people are more willing to help others, right? So essentially, when we feel awe, we want to help other people. That is being established by prior research. However, the interesting thing is about threat-based awe is it is also associated with fear and powerlessness. So threat-based O is not just O, it's the mixture of O and fear. And because of that, it is possible that when we feel threat-based O, even though we want to help other people, because we feel afraid and or powerless, we might also don't want to help other people. We feel we are unable to help other people. We feel that we are unable to bring the change, essentially. And that's the idea of threat-based O. That's why it is unique, because one, when we feel threat-based or we want to help other people, but sometimes we might also feel that like we cannot make any difference. So why we should help in the first place? And that's why threat-based O is interesting. And to address that, now that we know that threat-based O is a mixture of positive O and fear, and then it's kind of like on one hand it encourages prosocial behavior, but on the other hand there's also a level of powerlessness and a level of fear. And the question is like, how we can capitalize on threat-based O that we experience in the presence of natural disasters to encourage prosocial behavior. And in this regard, I'm going to explain and I'm going to kind of like briefly present two interrelated projects. Also, the first one, we argue that growth mindset can help threat-based O so that people want to help other people. And the second one is high control level. So the first one, growth mindset, is actually based on mindset theory. And essentially, it's kind of like lay beliefs about whether people are changeable or not. So people, we call it people with fixed mindset, they see that personal qualities of people are not changeable, they are stable. Whereas people with growth mindset, they believe that human characteristics, people personalities, they are changeable. So that's the idea of mindset essentially. So growth means changeable, fixed means stable or unchangeable. And prior research, and especially most of the research in mindset is actually starts from educational psychology. And the idea is like they found that like people with fixed mindset, and especially most of the research are on students essentially, they found that like when we have fixed mindset, they are more likely to give up when we experience hardships, when we experience difficulties and challenges, when we experience threats. Whereas people with growth mindset, they are more confident that like, well, I can change, which means that if I put effort, I can actually be better, essentially. I can make a difference, essentially. And based on this, what we argue then, like when we experience threat-based O, if we can make people experience or have the growth mindset, they will be more able to see that they actually, even though there is threat, they can use the threat as an opportunity to grow, which means that they can actually be more helpful for the society. And that means they are more likely to actually engage in prosocial behavior. That's basically that's essentially the word, the statement in bold there is actually the prediction or the hypothesis. Okay. And we tested across 5 experimental studies. So I mean, obviously we wouldn't have time to go through all. I'll present just one. But in study 1, we basically show that argument that threat-based O will increase prosocial behavior among growth mindset. It's unique for growth mindset. So there is no difference across different mindset when we actually examine positive O or fear or neutral state. So that's the study 1. It's more kind of like theoretical perspective, I guess. And study 2, we show that like when we feel threat-based O, we actually feel that we have more efficacy to donate, essentially. That's study 2. And study 3, we examine the context of natural disaster in Australia, wildfires, which basically happens 2 years ago. And then the last 2 studies, we examine the context of flood and Sunda Strait tsunami in Indonesia. And in this presentation, I'm going to focus on study 4B, in which we basically examine the context of Sunda Strait tsunami, which is basically like 2 years ago in Indonesia. But before I actually go to this study, I guess I just want to kind of like briefly explain the basic of experiment in case like some of you might not kind of like familiar with experiment, because basically I use all experimental studies. So the basic of experiment is basically we want to establish causality. And I like to use this example essentially. Right? So if you have data set of like chocolate consumption, and you can also ask participants, so you can ask participants how old they are. Sorry, not how old they are, whether they are married or not, right? And if you actually run a correlation, you'll find that there is a significant negative correlation between chocolate consumption and marital status, which means that people who eat more, people who are married, they're likely to eat chocolate. Now, if that's the case, then if we want to get married, then should we stop eating chocolate? If there is a negative correlation between chocolate consumption and marital status, does that mean that if we stop eating chocolate, it will increase our chance to get married? Well, I mean, I hope you don't actually agree with that. But clearly the answer is no. There is no explanation why if we stop eating chocolate, we'll get married. So the actual reason is actually the age, right? The actual underlying reason is actually age. Yes, people usually when we get older, we eat less chocolate because children eat more chocolate usually. And then the second one, when people get older more, it's higher likelihood they also get married. So the actual explanation is because of the age, but there is no explanation whatsoever between the relationship of chocolate consumption and marital status. And that's why, like, I want to argue here the difference between correlation and causality. Yes, there is a significant negative correlation between chocolate consumption and marital status, but there is no causality between those two. It doesn't mean that if I stop eating chocolate, I can get married, for example. And that's the idea of experiments. We conduct experiments because we want to examine the effects, the causal effects of independent variable on a dependent variable under controlled condition. So we manipulate the independent variable, or we call it IV, and then we measure the dependent variable, we call it DV. And if there is differences on the DV, then we can establish that, like, yes, it is because of IV or differences in IV, then we can also then leads to differences on DV. In other words, we can establish causality and internal validity. And that's why we call that experiment. So in study 4B, for this study, we have 120 participants, and then the design is basically one factor, two level between subject design. So essentially, half of the participants randomly, they see one advertisement and only one advertisement, and then the other randomly assigned the other half participants, they see the other condition essentially, and we want to compare these two essentially. That's the basic idea. And in this regard, we use the same advertisement with the same image. The difference is, like, we use different slogan of the organization. For the growth one, it's written like, we are always evolving. As you change, we are changed with you. Help the victims of Sunda Strait tsunami through donation. Whereas fix, we are always consistent. As you do not change, we stay the same with you. Right? And for the dependent variable, following prior research, we basically we basically told participants that like 10 of them will basically get 1,500,000 rupiahs, and then they can donate how much of this 1,500, basically a portion of those to donate. So it's kind of like real behavior, because for those who, some of them will actually take the money for the donation depending on how much they indicated, essentially, right? So these are the ads. It's the same image. The difference is just basically the slogan. And I collaborate with the Gajah Mada University for this study. And essentially what we found is basically when we use slogan with growth mindset, it significantly leads to a higher donation allocation than a slogan, fixed mindset slogan. And the difference is significant with P below 0.5 essentially. And that's basically provide evidence that, yeah, growth mindset can actually lead to a higher donation as compared to fixed mindset. Okay, so basically that's the kind of like the evidence for the first argument that growth mindset can be helpful. So the second one is high control level. So the idea is kind of like, if we feel threat-based O and we have high control level, we are more likely to donate. Okay, so high control level theory is a kind of like an established theory in psychology. Basically, how we as individuals, we kind of like represent objects according to psychological distance. So when we see objects psychologically from a distance, we will see more abstract. We will see the object more abstract. And when we see an object more close, psychologically speaking, we will see it, we will represent or construe the object more concretely, which is quite straightforward, right? Distant, we will see more abstract. Close is actually more concrete, but this is not physical. This is more kind of like psychologically speaking. And based on prior research, essentially, it has been established that control level can be activated or can be manipulated when we ask why, or how. So when we think of an object, when we think of a behavior, let's say eating an apple, for example, right? Eating an apple, the same object. When we think of why we eat an apple, because we are hungry. That is more abstract, because it's talking about why. Whereas when we think of kind of like how we eat an apple, well, we have to open our mouth, we have to actually bite the apple, and then we munch it, and then we swallow it, essentially. That's more concrete. So based on prior research, essentially, like in the advertising context, we can actually make people to think about why they do something, and that will activate high control level. And then how to do something, it will activate low control level. Now, the interesting thing is that when people thinking about high control level or why, they actually are able to step back, which is kind of like consistent with control level theory, and see from a bigger perspective, and then they're able to see the positive aspects. Why? Because we can see from afar, and we can see the beauty of it. No matter how difficult the situation is, when we step back, we're able to see somewhat the positive side of the situation, even though it's negative. Whereas when we think a negative situation from a close or how, we are more likely to see the negative side of an action, essentially. So that's based prior research. So high control level help us to see from a broader perspective, which is the positive benefits. At the same time, low control level help us actually make us focus on the negative side of the things, essentially. And if that's the case, then we can argue that like when we make people to process information at high control level, or making them to think about why, the threat-based O can actually heighten perceived need. It's like when we see a situation from a broader perspective, we can see that they're actually people in need, and that's why they want to actually help, which is consistent that like O can increase his help behavior, right? On the other hand, when people process information at low control level, or they are made to think about how, they'll be more focused on the threatening aspect of threat-based O. They'll focus that like, oh, but I am powerless, I'm not able to. And because of that, it will actually discourage processor behavior. So the prediction is like, when we combine threat-based O with why, people will focus more, people will donate more. But if we combine with how, people will donate less, because they will think that they are not able. It will focus on the threats more, essentially, based on the theoretical development. So in this study, we have 3 studies. So we examine different contexts. So we context earthquake, flood in Indonesia, and the wildfire in Australia as well. And in this, again, I wouldn't go through all, but I'll just focus on the study 3, which basically we examine the context of wildfire in Australia. So in study 3, we have 200 participants, and we have designed 2 by 2 between subjects design. So we focus on, we basically manipulate threat-based O using basically manipulating the cause of the disaster, nature or human. And the argument is like, if it's because of nature, people will experience more threat-based O, which has been established by prior research. And then the message is to manipulate control level, why or how. And essentially, like, this idea is like 200 people, approximately 50 people will basically will see nature and then why, and then 50 nature and how, and then the other 50 will see human condition and then why, and then human and how. So we have 4 conditions, and then we have 4 different, approximately 50 participants in that condition. We'll evaluate and add. So for the independent variable, we basically give them news about Australia wildfire, but then we adapt the wording of the news is to focus on the cause, which is its nature or human. And the idea is like, if it's nature, people will feel more threat-based or will experience higher level of threat-based. And then why and how is basically the moderator. And then like just a side note, like moderator is a variable that affects the direction or strength of relationship between IV and DV. Basically, depending on the moderator, the threat-based O can actually have positive or negative effects, which is consistent with our argument that like why is actually positive and how will it do negative effects. And then the DV prior research, we asked participants to donate some portion of their study. Essentially, it's similar like the other study that I presented. So this is the news frame. So this is kind of like a news about Australia's wildfire. But then if you see on the left one and then on the right one, we kind of like, the argument is kind of like, on the left one, I kind of like highlighted that natural causes are to blame most of the time of the wildfire. So if they read, essentially they will see that like, most likely like it's actually uncontrollable and it's not because of human, it's because of nature. The right one, I highlight that it's actually humans are the causes to blame because of the wildfire. Okay, and then the argument is the left one is actually will lead to threat-based O. And then so we see the differences would be on the left one. Okay, and this is the advertising stimuli essentially. So how versus why is the same image. The difference basically how or why. And these are the findings. So in the context of, as we can see, like in the context of why message, so when we use threat-based O, so threat-based O is actually like the natural disaster, actually leads to a higher donation allocation as compared to control. So control is like human cause. Whereas when we talk about how, the threat-based O or the natural disaster actually leads to a lower level of donations as compared to control. So this kind of like showed evidence to our predictions that like the threat-based O can actually have positive or negative effects depending on whether it's high control level or low control level. Okay, so yeah, so I guess from those two, those two studies basically kind of like a sample of the studies from the two projects that I had. But the idea that I want to highlight here is essentially like these two projects basically kind of like examine how we can encourage social behavior using threat-based O. And that's meaningful because prior research shows that like we can feel awe when we think of COVID-19 because we think like that's just so small, but then the effects is so great. We feel so small. So we feel awe, but we feel threatened, and that's threat-based O. And then what we have shown in these two projects is kind of like if we combine this threat-based O, because which we experience because of natural disaster of COVID-19, we can encourage prosocial behavior using growth mindset and then also high control level. And then it's helpful, or practically speaking, because if we encourage prosocial behavior, it can build our resilience as individual, but also as a society, so that we can overcome this hardship. And from the government perspective as well, from the public policy marketing as well, this is also useful indirectly for the government because it can help government to deal with recovery efforts because there's a rising cost associated with the recovery efforts, essentially. So if we encourage people to help each other, hopefully the government burden to spend a lot of money on disaster recovery can also be reduced. So yes, that's the end of my presentation. I hope that's clear and helpful. And I also just want to also acknowledge my collaborators. So in these two projects, so I have Yuriso from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, Widya Pramita from the Gajah Mada University, and also Felix Septianto from the Institute of Bandung. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Felix, for the explanation about your research, right? I think it's very interesting, especially it's related with our recent condition. Yeah, but it's really, I see that it's really marketing, but in this audience it's very mixed. Yeah. Is there any question from the audience? I want to ask you, yeah, maybe audience still thinking what they want to ask. Very interesting, pro-social behavior. Yeah, in this condition, actually, I agree that we have to support each other to overcome this hardship. Yeah. But in your research, you say you explain about chocolate consumption. I still confused. What the relationship? What the relation chocolate consumption with growth mindset? Can you explain about that, Felix?
Yeah, it's actually unrelated. So I use chocolate consumption. Oh, it's unrelated. It's not related. I use chocolate consumption is as an example to explain what is the difference, why I use experiments. Because in my studies, I use experiments. And the reason I use experiments is because experiments can establish causality. And causality is different than correlation because of the example that I gave about chocolate consumption. So we have a data set about chocolate consumption, and then we have a data set about the marital status, married or not married, right? So most likely, most of the times, we will find a significant negative correlation, which basically a higher level of chocolate consumption is associated with lower likelihood to get married. So there is a significant negative correlation, but it doesn't mean that there is causality. Yes. Usually in most cases like that, but it doesn't mean there is causality. It doesn't mean that if I stop eating chocolate, I'll be able to get married. Because there is no correlation. It's not causality. Exactly. The intervening variable is actually age. The reason there is negative correlation is because the older we are, usually the less likely we eat. I mean, the less we eat chocolate, usually. And then the older we are, the higher likelihood we usually get married as well. So the reason there is negative correlation is not because of there is causality, but that's just because the correlation is just because there, but it's not causality. And that's why experiments is important to establish that whether independent variable can actually influence dependent variable. So it's not, there is not, I use that example just to explain the difference between causality and correlation.
Okay. What about the result? I still don't get it. How your research result to make a growth mindset? Maybe I need something.
Yeah. So
I agree that a pro-social behavior support each other, make other. If someone feel that they have support or they have social support, they're more confident, and then they can make the difference with the condition. Yeah, they have support that the condition. If you use the treat to become an opportunity, it will make us a growth. I agree with it. I still understand what the result of your research. Sorry if I don't get it.
So actually kind of like start like in the first things, like I established that, like as you mentioned, kind of like encouraging pro-social behavior is important, right?
Yeah.
And in these two projects, I examine pro-social behavior by examining the emotion of threat-based awe. I focus on threat-based awe. And threat-based awe is interesting because on the one hand, when people feel threat-based awe, they want to help other people.
Yeah.
At the same time, when people feel threat-based awe, they also feel afraid or powerless. And that's why they might not want to. And the question is like, because we feel threat-based or in the presence of natural disasters, then how we can make people focus on the helping and not focus on the powerlessness, essentially. And that's why, as you pinpoint, growth mindset will be helpful, because people with growth mindset, they will see challenges, threats, difficulties as an opportunity to grow. And that's why when they feel threat-based or because of natural disasters, instead of feeling powerless, they will feel that they can actually make a difference. And that's why they want to actually help other people. And in the experiment itself, essentially, like I manipulate threats-based awe using the image. So I conducted a pretest and showed that this image indeed elicits threat-based awe. And then if you combine this image with either these two slogan, growth or fix, essentially, growth is basically we are always evolving, or fix we're always consistent. What we found is that like growth mindset actually significantly leads to a higher donation allocation than fixed mindset. So this kind of like support the idea that like growth mindset is better than fixed mindset when when people experience threat-based or to encourage pro-social behavior. Yeah, is that clear? Sorry.
Yeah, you meant that it's a stimuli from the advertising.
Yeah,
to create a growth mindset, right?
Yes. So I manipulate the slogan.
Yeah.
So you see the bottom one, the left one is consistency, which is basically fixed mindset. The right one is growth mindset. So when people see the right one, and then they see the picture of tsunami there, they are more likely to donate when they see the left one. Yeah.
From the picture, how they mean the mean of the picture. Yeah. Maybe maybe different people can be different meaning from the same picture.
Oh yeah, well, that's true. But one, we conduct a pretest to show that like the picture actually elicit threat-based hope. So we have conduct pretest beforehand. And secondly, that's also the idea of experiment. So when we think of like individual differences, there's a lot of individual differences that we cannot control. But then the idea of experiment is like we randomly assign them, and the idea of randomization is basically like, even though there are individual differences, we can assume that individual differences in one condition would be similar with individual differences in the other condition. So they are, because we control everything and we only manipulate fixed or growth. So that's the idea of experiment, right? Because essentially we only manipulate one and then the rest is made consistent. So because of that, like, yes, I agree that people can feel, or people might have different personality, people might see different things, all those things, but those are taken care by randomization. And that's why experiments are useful, because with experiments, we can establish causality, but we can also have high internal validity. And that's why experiments is actually better than kind of like correlation, like survey, because we can establish that with experiment, essentially. So, yeah.
Very clear. What about the audience? Ada pertanyaan nggak? Boleh, silakan tanya. Mungkin Mbak Raras ada yang mau ditanyakan?
Mungkin audiens dulu ya Pak Ibu. Mungkin
May I have a question, Ibu Dit?
Oke, Bu Lindia. Okay, thank you for coming here.
Thank you, ma'am.
How are you? Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Please.
Okay, I've got a. Sorry, I'm coming late. So I don't know what's happening at the beginning. But I am interested in the ThreatBased all that is in the study. One of them is taken from the case of tsunami that was really treating people, so they feel that if it happened to them, then perhaps they will have the same bad situation. So it will raise their emotions, and it raised to the pro-social behavior to do something. But what is coming to my mind is the model of this research is, I mean, can it be the threat, the threat-based all, about the threat-based all, can it be shifted to other situation that is like what is that situation instead of something threatened? I don't know in what study beside the tsunami, COVID, and what else?
I have an earthquake and
the wildfire,
wildfire,
tsunami, and apa tadi COVID,
tsunami, and
What about the social condition after the following the pandemic, COVID pandemic, that is really actually the situation is threatening actually, but not too explicit like a wildfire, earthquake. But actually people feel threatened by the economic development, the reduced income. Do you think it can also be shifted to that situation? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So I think we have to come back, I think, to the definition of threat-based awe. So threat-based awe is actually the feeling when, on the one hand, we feel awe because we experience that we are small, but at the same time we feel threatened, right? So when you mention kind of like social economic issues and all those kind of like financial situation, all those things, I don't think that would actually elicit threat-based awe. So what I mean is like that situations is kind of like beyond the context of these projects, because I guess at least the way we kind of like build the argument or develop the theories, it's kind of like the argument that like when we feel awe, feeling awe is actually when we feel the feeling that we experience in the presence of something great. Whereas when we think of kind of like socioeconomic situations, and then a lot of kind of like even deaths, for example, when we read like a lot of people, how many people have died because of COVID, I don't think people will feel awe, they will just feel afraid. And that's not really threat-based awe, essentially. So with that, actually, you need a different appeal, more like that. So the focus of at least these two projects is literally focusing on the scope is focusing on threat-based awe, and then the usually threat-based awe is focusing on the disaster itself. So not on the aftermath or the additional or like the after consequences, but it's more on the disaster itself.
This is like a physically affected.
Yeah, the actual disaster, I think. So, I mean, I do have another paper, for example, like when we think of like the deaths because of disaster, they actually feel sad, but the sadness is actually like because of that they cannot control, because we cannot control that, right? We have no control over that. And because of that, for those people who feel sad associated with natural disaster, but it's because of the death, but it's not threat-based, oh, it's sad, we use kind of like fresh start appeal. So there is appeal kind of like fresh start, kind of like this is a new beginning. It's more kind of like that fresh start, right? So that is actually more useful when we highlight the effects of, let's say, disaster or COVID-19 on death, essentially. Because when we think of death, we don't feel awe, we just feel afraid. We feel sad and afraid, really, I guess. So to answer your question, I guess I agree. It might be that they might experience different emotions, but that's not that's beyond, I guess, the scope of this research, because this research, these two projects focusing on threat-based awe, which focus on the disaster itself and not the additional consequences from that.
Beyond that area. Yeah.
Yes.
Because referring to Gordon 2017, threat is associated with fear and powerlessness. Yeah. So,
yes. So, but threat-based is like a mixture. Yeah. Yeah.
Social and financial drop is, to me, is also something important to anticipate, and perhaps your research can give it's like an initiation to think something beyond after the COVID pandemic, because people are feeling fear about their lives.
Yeah. So I mean, as I mentioned, like yes. So what Gordon showed is actually like threat-based awe is a mixture of awe and fear and powerlessness. It's not just fear or powerlessness. So threat-based awe is the mixture of awe, but it's also associated with fear and powerlessness.
But your research now has been on like natural, focusing on natural impact.
Yeah. Yes. But as I mentioned, like the only other research that I have at the moment that I have published on natural, I mean, like the aftermath is more kind of like death. So if you highlight the number of deaths, people will feel afraid and sad because of that. And because that we cannot control, we cannot turn back that, we cannot make people alive again. So the appeal that will be helpful, actually, they call it fresh start mindset. Essentially kind of like, instead of saying like, we can change this, it's better to say, we can start again. That this is a new beginning, for example. So that's another research that I didn't focus on here. But yeah, that's an example. Like if you want to focus on the aftermath, depending on what I focused before is kind of like the death of the death toll associated with disasters. Rather than saying that we can change, it's better to say we can start again, for example. So that's an example. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Excuse me, Felix, can we say that the R is not just because of the natural disaster?
Yeah, I mean, basically ThreatBased O is a lot of, ThreatBased O is a mixture between awe, we feel amazed, but also we feel afraid. When we talk about the concept of God, for example, in the presence of God, we don't feel just awe, we feel respect, we feel fearful. So when we talk about the concept of God or religion, it is to some extent ThreatBased awe, because we're not just feeling good, we should feel fearful in front of God, right? In the presence of God, the idea of God. So even when we talk about God, it is ThreatBased awe. But I use ThreatBased awe in this research because natural disasters are the most common, you can say, elicitors of ThreatBased awe, the most common one. But yeah, I agree. As you said, like there are different things that make people feel ThreatBased awe. But yeah, but natural disasters is one of the most common ones.
Maybe with the concept, our concept is can make people more sensitive, more empathy with others, right? Okay, that's great concept. Okay, enough, Bu Lindy.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Dien, for the time.
Thank you, Bu Lindy. This is one question, yeah.
Yeah, the one question from Joshua.
Joshua. Okay. Joshua, are you there? And you wanna say directly to Felix?
Oke, thank you, Bu Dien.
Maaf
mengetik, saya nggak terlalu paham bahasa Inggris.
Ya, Pak, bahasa Indonesia boleh, Pak.
Oke, terima kasih waktunya, Sir Felix. I want to get your advice because I'm concerned to tourist destination. We know all tourist destination is closed by government rules, and we as a student want to make support. So what we can do to support them so they can survive while their job is closed by government. Thank you. Agak rumit ya.
About the destination, ya.
Mungkin karena banyak yang mau ngambil riset topik terkait sama ini ya, tourism. COVID selama pandemic.
Okay, benar.
Yeah.
So maybe you can suggest some topic. I mean, they will relate it to the prosocial behavior, but in a tourism context. So maybe you have some insight for them.
To be honest, like I think that question is really difficult. That's $1 million question, because if you know that like the government will be fine, right? Everyone will be fine. So I don't think there is any. I mean, I definitely will not be able to answer that. But I guess from the projects that I guess the common theme that I want to build from these projects, right, at the beginning, when we kind of idea like why we examine prosociality, it's because if we encourage people to be prosocial and to help each other, we can build resilience at the individual level, community level, and also reduce government burden, right? So I think the idea is kind of like when we talk about tourism, and then obviously there's a lot of businesses and industry, especially in tourism, that is being affected by COVID-19, right? But I think if we want to build based on that, I think the idea is like, rather than focusing on how they can get how they can just survive per se. It's also good to think as a community. So when we think of social marketing, it's not just about getting money, but also build a better society. And that's the idea, kind of like the idea of these projects that I present is like, if we make people help each other, it's not just for them. It can actually help us as a community. It can build social support. And that's why, like, if we think of kind of like what we can do in the tourism industry. So maybe, for instance, you can kind of like see which one is actually better. Maybe is it actually better a normal, if we talk about advertisement, right? Is it good just a normal advertising to make people kind of like, why don't you come, and all those things? Or kind of like frame it in a way so that you kind of like build tourism as a community, you know, kind of like, let's do this together. We can help each other, kind of like a team. So one of the interesting thing that, like, in New Zealand, for example, as an example, the fact that kind of like they use they call it a team of 5 million. So the prime minister, she basically kind of like frame kind of like us as kind of like a team of 5 million. We are a team. We are helping each other. So that's the idea as well with tourism. Like, if you kind of like see whether this framing kind of like as a community, we can help each other, would that actually better than just normal advertising, right? And for the government is as well kind of like it's the same. When we talk about government, I guess like they have a lot of stuff on the table. And because of that, if the idea is kind of like, say, how we can reduce government burden by kind of like we encourage each other, the people, to help each other, that might be also better. So I think the focus there will be kind of like, if you want to compare, if you want to study that topic, it's more kind of like how we can focus, or how you can, basically you can use from the social marketing perspective, how the tourism can be benefited from social marketing, how we can actually help each other for the social good, especially during this time in pandemic where basically everyone is being affected. So yeah, to be honest, like, I'm sorry, it's quite vague. I understand, because like, to be honest, like, if I know that if any one of us, I know that the answer of that question, like, we can just go to the government and we'll be the, I don't know, the minister, maybe, I don't know. That's $1 million question, definitely. And I guess, yeah, and everyone is being affected by COVID-19. So yeah, I think what I want to build based on this research is kind of like the idea, if like, yeah, if we can frame it kind of like we can help each other, we are a team, we can help each other in this pandemic, that might be better way, I guess, for us to go forward, and for the government as well. So yeah, I hope that answers, even though it's quite vague.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the answer.
Okay, one question, like, I want to ask you about the implication of the research, yeah, with the what the title is, charitable advertising. Yeah, is it can be applied in the Indonesian people with charitable advertising to trigger the empathy of the society?
Yeah, I think so, because in one study we did in Indonesia in the context of tsunami, and then in the other one we used in the context of flood. So we used Sunda Strait tsunami in one study. Yeah. And in the other study we also use, I think, different contexts, but also in Indonesia, like I think like flood Indonesia. So yeah, I believe so, because like, at least in one study we use the context of Indonesia, at least in this regard.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any question?
Waktunya sudah hampir habis, Ibu. Mungkin
ya. 3 minutes ya.
3 minutes ya. Mungkin ada teman-teman yang
3 minutes again, 3 minutes more.
Dr. Felix, could you please share your PPT file to the chat?
Yes.
Everyone is chatting me, asking for your PPT.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yes, I will. I think it might be easier. I can send it to you.
Okay. Here I see my friends, my doctoral program friends, Professor Mahrina Sari. Thank you for joining with us. You want to say something about this topic? Please, Professor Mahrina Sari. How are you? I see your camera on and I touch you.
Mikrofonnya masih belum on.
Masih mute.
Okay, thank you very much for the material here, yeah, international webinar. That I think this Mr. Felix is excellent job, yeah. Talking about the experiment, maybe yeah. I wait for your material, yeah, from YouTube. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dien, Miss Dien.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you for joining with us,
Yeah,
Bu Marina.
most welcome. Most welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe we can ending with the Q&A session. Bu Raras, is okay?
Ya, boleh Bu. Mungkin
ya.
teman-teman tidak ada yang raise hand, pertanyaan sudah terjawab semua, mungkin akan diakhiri Q&A session.
Gitu ya. Okay, thank you so much. We can finish this session. Yeah. This is the interesting topic. Yeah. Maybe there are still many question in mind, gitu ya. But can explain the question. But we have to finish the session. Yeah. There are such a fruitful insight from this seminar, from the explanation from Felix. Yeah. I do a wrap from what we discussed, and I get pro-social behavior. It's very interesting. Yeah, we have to support each other, especially in recent condition. Yeah, pandemic COVID that everybody feel the effect of this condition. Yeah, we have to support each other to overcome this hardship. As the society and as the individual, yeah, in order to people can be more resilient, yeah, and have a growth mindset, and they can be, hopefully they can change the threats, become the opportunity. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Felix. Yeah, once again I would like to thank to our great speaker today for the time that you give for us, and fruitful explanation about the charitable advertising, and also for all participants, of course, that have joined the seminar on behalf of the Department of Management, Faculty of Economy and Business, Universitas Airlangga. I apologize for any problem or mistakes during this seminar process. Maybe, yeah, we do have to improve for the next seminar. Okay. We have to close because for the last agenda, yeah, Dr. Yeti have to close, but she want to say sorry because she couldn't attend and give closing remark because there is something that she has to arrange, and she would like to say thank you so much for Dr. Felix and all of the participants. Okay, the seminar has also been recorded and will be uploaded on the Department of Management official YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ding the bell like YouTube artists. Yeah, I would like to remind you all of the confirm new attendance and automatically recorded by Zoom when you join this seminar, and certificate will be sent to your email. Thank you so much for all the participants. We really appreciate it having you all here today, and we hope to see you again in the next seminar of the serial international seminar that we brought by Department of Management, Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Airlangga. We wish you all safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Dr. Felix.
So much.
Dr.
Thank
Rara,
We
you.
waiting for your
very
PPT,
much.
Dr. Felix.